In this video, I'm going to give you a quick overview of what you need to know before taking the CPC exam. Hey everyone, I'm Victoria. I'm a medical coder, auditor, educator, and content creator, and on my channel, I provide tips, tricks, and tutorials to help you be successful in a medical coding career. If you haven't already, I highly encourage you to subscribe, hit that notification bell so you can get alerts when I post new episodes. You will have a lot on your plate when it comes time for this test, so I want to go over some things that are really important so that you can be prepared. Hopefully this video will answer all of those questions or concerns that you may have so that everything goes smoothly for your big exam day. So the first important thing to understand is that this exam is going to test you on concepts. It is not just going to be a can you look up a code in a CPT book type of test. It really is going to test you on the knowledge of the guidelines, understanding the difference between a displaced or non-displaced fracture, understanding how to measure for lesions, understanding how to sequence ICD-10-CM codes. You may have some questions that are a little bit more simplistic in the lookup nature of them, but really they are going to be testing your knowledge of the guidelines and how to apply them. And understand that if you're taking it in person with other examinees, first off, they might have been studying this. They might be in like an associate's degree program or a bachelor's degree program where they've been studying to prepare them for this exam for a long, long time, and they may finish faster. The other thing to understand is that these are AAPC exam testing areas. They are not CPC exam testing areas in person. So other people there, other examinees, might not be taking the CPC exam. So if you see someone else who finishes way ahead of time, don't panic because they might be taking a specialty examination and they've been working in that specialty for 10 years, or they might be taking an entirely different credential examination. So don't panic if you see someone finish earlier than you or going through questions faster than you because they might not be taking the same exam. I don't remember what certification I was sitting for, but I do remember that there was one where a lady was taking her pediatric specialty exam and she had worked in pediatrics for years and years and years, so it was very easy for her to quickly get through those exams, and she finished in half of the time that it took that was allotted for the exam. Another important thing to understand about the CPC exam is that you are allowed your CPT book, your ICD-10-CM book, and your HCPCS book. Definitely check out the AAPC website on the specifics of what is permitted for books. I will actually link that below. So you're not allowed a medical dictionary. A lot of people ask questions about that. Well, what medical dictionary should I bring to the exam? You're not permitted to bring a medical dictionary to the exam. If there's certain terms that you're like, oh gosh, I can never remember what this term means, you can write them in one of your books in your CPT or your ICD-10-CM, but there's not a lot of questions on the exam that are specific to medical terminology, but they will be intermingled, of course, in the textual and contextual things of the questions on the exam. If you don't understand the medical terminology, it's going to cut into your time because if you have to constantly be looking up terms and remembering where did I write this in my books, that's definitely going to prolong the time you have to answer those questions. Now, the exam itself is 100% multiple choice, and this is something that there's been a lot of questions on for 2022 because there was a switch in the quote-unquote case studies, which we'll get to. I'll talk more about those in depth, so definitely stick around, but the questions you can see on the AAPC site say that it is 100 multiple choice questions. So oftentimes you can do things like use process of elimination. I always suggest read the question itself and the answers first, because sometimes you might have something that is a 2-page SOAP note or a page-long operative note, and when you get to the end, you realize that what they're actually asking is something kind of simplistic, and you can more so scan that note to pinpoint exactly where it is that you need to focus on and abstract. You know, if you're focusing on just trying to read through a 2-page operative note and going, oh my gosh, what is this all I'm supposed to be picking out? I don't know. What am I supposed to be paying attention to? And then you get to the end and they're like, what are the ICD-10-CM codes? Now you have to go back and go, oh yeah, what were the ICD-10-CM codes? So read that question first so that when you're going back and reading that case, you know you're supposed to be focusing your attention on the ICD-10-CM codes versus the procedure itself. Or you might look at those 4 multiple choice options and realize the only difference between one of them is maybe a modifier, and then a difference between another one is, you know, the CPT code is one different. You're like, oh, I could just flip to the CPT code and see which of these 2 options it is. I actually have a whole playlist you can watch. I will link it below and put it at the end of this video as well, that go over some questions that you can get familiar with how to do that process of elimination. That whole playlist is just CPC exam tips. You can also find it on the main page of this channel. For 2022, the CPC exam is 100 questions. It is 4 hours long, and each of those 100 questions is the exact same weight, meaning each one is worth 1 point. So you need to get 70 questions correct in order to get a passing grade. And that 70% is 70 overall. So even if you miss all of your questions on HCPCs and you get 0 HCPC questions correct, you can still get a passing grade because it's 70% overall. So one thing they'll do that will really help out your strategy in 2022 is they've kind of grouped together the case studies. The CPC exam has always had case studies. They've just mingled them in. You might have one in the 40,000 series of CPT and one in the 60,000 series. You might have an E&M. Now they've taken those cases, which if you have the medical coding training books, like this is my one from 2021, this is all filled with cases. So when they say case studies, this is what they're talking about, these big, long cases. Now in these ones that you do in the workbook are not multiple choice. Your exam will be multiple choice. So if you're in a CPC curriculum program and you have this workbook, this is going to be great practice for those case studies. Now, because all of those case studies are the exact same point as a question asking you what does cardiomegaly mean, you can probably answer what cardiomegaly means, an enlargement of the heart, really quickly, but it will take you longer to get through a case study. So you want to get that 1 point for that short question before diving into those longer questions. And now that the case studies are kind of all in one section, you can visually see them. I believe they said they are holding them till the end of the exam. So when you're getting your exam booklet, you can go, oh yeah, I'm going to wait and do these case studies at the end because they're going to take more time. And you definitely want to fill in all of the bubbles and make sure you do this within your time allotment, because once they call time, your 4 hours is up. Even if you have 5 or 6 questions you still need to fill in your examination grid that you need to fill in with your number 2 pencil or even take online. Once time is up, you can't just go, oh, well, I just need to fill these in. Once time is up, time is up. If you are caught filling in your answer grid after the time, you can be disqualified from the exam. So pay attention to when you've only got maybe 5 minutes left, and if you have some questions that you haven't filled in the answer yet, go back in and fill them all in. Whatever strategy you want. If you want to fill them in sporadically, if you want to fill all of them, see, whatever your thought process is, because as long as it's filled in, you have at least a 1 in 4 chance that you maybe picked the right answer. But if you leave it empty, you have a 0 in 4 chance that it's automatically wrong. Now, another thing to understand about the CPC exam, which is different from other type of certification exams, is that they are held by volunteers. So typically the in-person exams are hosted by local chapters, which is a team of volunteers that come together to host educational events and host examinations. So because they don't have an exam center, because they don't have an institution to work at regularly, they borrow space. They might rent it from a hotel, they might borrow it from the hospital, they might borrow it from, a local school. So they don't always have control over some of those environmental factors, like if something comes over the intercom or if there is a temperature problem. So it's recommended in person to dress in layers, bring a t-shirt and then a jacket you can put on top or a hoodie, because sometimes it might be cold or drafty and you want to be layered up so that you can be comfortable during your exam, because the people who are there proctoring and making sure that you're being compliant with the exam might not have control over some of those environmental factors. Actually, story time, I was once hosting my chapter's local seminar, and the temperature of the room started getting freezing cold, and all of the attendees were like, oh my God, we want to put their jackets on, their mittens on. They were just absolutely frigid, freezing. Come to find out that one of the fellow officers was actually having hot flashes and asking the people who were maintaining the room to continually turn down the temperature because she thought it was really hot in there because she was having hot flashes. So yeah, definitely dress in layers in case you need to adapt to any of those temperature changes at your exam. Now, if you're testing Online, you have to make sure that you control your environment. So you have to make sure that the appropriate temperature is set, because you will not be able to leave and go and change it and come back. There's certain requirements for online exams. Your desk has to be cleared. You can't have dogs scratching at your door. You can't have TVs on in the background, anything that would sound like any kind of noise, regardless of whether it is or isn't someone feeding you answers to the exam. It's just any noise is not permitted around. Actually, the online exam has really strict requirements. Like, you have to have an external camera. It can't be an embedded laptop camera. You have to have something external so they can see your desk. I actually got this on Amazon, I think, so I'll link it below if you're taking it online and you want something so that you can kind of position it correctly so that you can make sure that they're seeing your keyboard and everything adequately. A lot of webcams just have a little thumb screw at the bottom, so this is just a standard video screw that you can screw on. So if you get a webcam that has one of these, you can get a little stand for it and move it all around. Most webcams these days are pretty good quality. They're very plug and play, so just look for like a 1080 webcam and you should be good no matter what you kind of get. Now with the online exam, you can't have anything on your desk but your books and a water. You cannot have snacks. They will break it into two-hour-long sessions, and you can schedule when you want to take those 2 sessions. So you don't have to do 2 hours and then you get like a half-hour break and then take the other 2 hours. You get to schedule when you want to do each of those 2-hour pieces. Honestly, if your home is not conducive to the needs of that exam because you've got kids running around, or you have an elderly parent that has a very loud TV, and you don't have like an employer where you can borrow space, or a library, I would also suggest maybe just renting a cheap hotel room for the day, getting onto their free Wi-Fi with your laptop and your books. A lot of them have desks that you can use in the room, and seeing if that might be a better fit for you, if you can schedule it all in one day and do it in a hotel room where they can kind of see that there's no one else there and you've just got your book stretched out on the desk. Or you might have a library meeting room that you can rent for fairly cheap, because libraries are traditionally pretty quiet. So if you don't have that conducive home environment and you're thinking, oh, well, I have to take it in person, consider that there might be alternatives like a library or like renting a cheap hotel space. Now next, and I say this over and over and over again, practice makes perfect. So if you're like, oh, I'm about to take my CPC exam, I don't know, like, well, how do I review? Practice, practice, practice. If you have workbooks and textbooks that maybe, and I see this a lot, your teacher may have only assigned you do the odd questions and none of your evens are answered. Well, that would be a great way to review for your exam, right? To go through all of those maybe case questions at the end, or review questions that you didn't do because they weren't actually assigned as part of your curriculum. So go through any materials that you haven't answered, read through your books again, and that practice makes perfect. So get practice exams. I have an on-demand review if you're interested in that. That does include some practice cases as well. You can check out my review on my website, contempocoding.com, or again, link it in the description below. Or even better, you might be able to find a local chapter that is hosting a free CPC review. Sometimes you can find chapters that have these for free because they have someone who's a great educator, or it's just a service they want to provide, because they do have some materials in order to host these reviews. So you might be able to find a local chapter, and it doesn't necessarily have to be the one you're assigned. You can look at other chapters and ask if they have capacity for you to participate as well. And see if they have some review materials or a review course on their Zoom that they're going to have that you can participate in. Now, before I get into my final thoughts on kind of the exam structure, I want to go back to my thoughts on the in-person exam. So in person, make sure that you do pack like a drink or a snack. Because the exam is shortened now, you probably won't need to pack an entire lunch. So previously, when it was 5 hours and 40 minutes, if you started at 8 a.m., you wouldn't finish until 1:40. So by noon, you'd probably be pretty hungry and you might have to pack like a sandwich or something. But now that we've shortened the exam, you can probably make it without having to eat an entire meal. But pack something that's not going to be really, crunchy or loud. You don't want to be ripping open a bag of Doritos in the middle of the exam, and because everyone will start staring at you like, what the heck are you doing that you need to rip open this entire bag of Doritos? Plus, you just don't want to get Dorito cheese all over your exam stuff and your books. So pack like granola bars or protein bars, even things like Uncrustables. You can get one of those PB&J Uncrustables, stick it in your bag, and by the time you get hungry, maybe around 10 or 11 o'clock if you start at 8 a.m., then it'll be thawed and ready for you. You pull it right out of the freezer, and then by then it's ready. But you want to have something available because you don't want a grumbly tummy distracting you on your big exam day. For in-person exams, it's also not a bad idea to figure out where exactly you're going. So what roads are you taking? What portion of the facility are you going to be entering in? Where are you going? So make sure that you're prepared ahead of time, not just setting up your ways that morning and going, oh my gosh, I didn't realize that there's construction and it's going to take me an extra 20, 30 minutes. Because once they close those doors for the exam, that's it. They do not let anyone else in. Once the exam doors have closed and they have started, you cannot come late to the exam. So you have to make sure that you're on time. And finally, make sure that you review that exam breakdown. They give it to you right on the AAPC website, so you know exactly what to focus on, what type of questions they're going to ask. There's 6 questions for each series of CPT. So the 10,000 series, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, and then E&M are all going to have 6 questions each for those sections. 4 anesthesia, 6 radiology, 6 lab and path, 6 medicine. There's going to be 4 questions that are just med term. You're going to have 4 questions just anatomy, 5 questions that are going to be ICD-10-CM diagnosis questions, 3 HCPCS questions. There's going to be 7 questions just on ICD-10-CM guidelines. There's going to be 3 compliance and regulatory, and that case section, which could be anything from CPT, they could be E&M, they could be surgeries, they could be med-term compliance. Those will test your knowledge in those 10 cases. And actually, those practice exams they have online, they are very similar to what are on the actual examination. I have actually heard some students though recently say, oh, we didn't even go over HCPCS in my class. I'm not sure I even have a book. They might go to their exam and not bring their HCPCS book, but there will be some HCPCS questions, especially on things like those J drug codes. You might see some of those on your CPC exam, and you can't look them up in your CPT book because they're in your HCPCS manual. So really go through the AAPC website, look over that exam breakdown of how many questions and what type of questions they're going to be asking. And also any emails that they send to you pertaining to your exam, make sure you read through those as well, especially for those online ones, because they have some very strict requirements of what you need to make sure that you have set up in order for that online exam to be proctored very smoothly. And make sure you're taking the right books too, because you can take only the AMA version of the CPT manual, but you can take whatever ICD-10-CM or HCPCS versions you want. So if you like Optum, you like the AAPC version, you like the Bucks version of ICD-10 or HCPCS, you can take whatever preferred version you want. I hope this video helped you out on your certification journey. If you want to see some hands-on, this is how you break down questions on the exam type information, this is the playlist you want to check out. So which tip did you find most helpful? Definitely let me know in the comments below. By the way, if you want one of these cool shirts like I have, you can check them out in my merch store. I will see you guys in the next video. And until then, just keep on coding on.